Greetings, everyone. Welcome to True Health Live. So glad you could join us. We are back. This is the True Health Live panel of co-hosts. I'm Sully. I'm joined by my dynamic co-hosts, Anishka Gopilov, Precious Stephanie, and Alia Kumsani. Welcome back, Alia.
Thank
If I had
you.
sound effects, it would be that, like the stadium. Welcome back.
Thank
So
you.
we have like a big reveal. So Alia's been away because tell them why you're away, Alia.
So yes, I was off for maternity leave. So I recently have given birth. It's now been, I'm losing track of time. But yes, it's approaching 4 months now, and it's just started back at work. Gave birth in March. So it's been quite a journey. I was pregnant throughout COVID, so that was in itself an experience. Yeah, and we're just learning and you know um, learning to cope as the day goes by, and as things change and challenges get, I mean, I wouldn't say easier but different. So that's what it's been like, yeah, as of
Yeah,
recently.
yeah. So this month in July, we're gonna focus on maternal health. So today we're talking about working moms, and so like we have three moms on the panel. So we have a whole lot of experience of what it's like to be working moms. So we'll take it from like Alia, your experience, like you said, like being pregnant throughout COVID, and then what's that like? What that is like going back to work virtually and in person, and also also managing a very new person in the world, and then Vishka and Precious, like what that was like, like even before, like have there been any changes, like based on what Ali is sharing about her experience, like what did that look like for you, and then even like having children who are a little bit older, what that's like. So Alia, like, give us the play by play. What had happened?
So I got pregnant back last year. Yeah, it
Really?
was a pleasant surprise. Yes, it was something that we're very happy about. But yeah, it was an interesting experience from the get-go, because we were in the midst of COVID. There were all, you were reading the headlines, the newspaper headlines, the cases going up. It was really scary. There were experiences that were being shared about women having to, deliver alone without having that support person. So those were all the things that you were hearing and fearing, and you were one. It's natural to kind of to get fearful and wonder, how am I going to cope? Family members, being away from family members, being so isolated, I think was very challenging. Even though we did stay in touch virtually, not having someone from your family, your mum, your siblings, being there for you, sharing their experiences firsthand, I think that was, a challenge in itself. Also, as an athlete, it was also interesting because there were no guidelines. You're given very generic guidelines in terms of, how you should exercise, the intensity at which you should exercise. I knew that I wanted to continue exercising. I didn't know if that was going to be possible, health-wise and otherwise. So it was navigating the whole pregnancy journey, navigating the whole pregnancy while remaining, fit and healthy, and keeping up with a training program of some sort. So it was a lot of things to juggle, I would say. Also, I worked throughout the pregnancy as well. I have to admit that, working from home really did help. And, again, I will remind, I remind myself as well, I'm really privileged to have to say that, not many people can, say the same thing, and not many people had that privilege. So in that sense, working from home did actually make it a lot easier for me. It enabled me to kind of have more family time, enabled me to kind of deal with the daily challenges of pregnancies, the different trimesters, and the challenges that came with that. And then of course, so I would say I'd relatively had a pretty smooth pregnancy. I continued training, continued rowing. So I row. I continued that up until 7 months. And then beyond 7 months, that's when form started to kind of be compromised. So I stuck with strength training, and I did a lot of dynamic Pilates, which really helped, just keep my mental state in a good place, keep me physically active. And the whole point was to enable me to recover from whatever delivery I was going to have. So yeah, no, I can definitely say that did help me a lot. So, and then, yeah, so the delivery day came, the apprehension surrounding that, we're there. We didn't know whether it was what was going to happen, essentially. Again, not having family members there was really difficult. Thankfully, they had changed the law by that time to allow one support person with you. But the problem was, not having access to like the mother groups that they usually would have, the facilities that they would normally have on board, and you'd be able to physically go in and talk to someone or seek advice, or have, kind of like a group of mothers or to-be mothers that you could share your experiences with. There was none of that. So again, it was all stepping into the bits of the unknown, and the fears, and dealing with the fears that, not naturally would come with that. The delivery was eventful, let's put it that way. Yeah, it was pretty traumatic for me as a first-time mom, yes. But I have to again admit, owing to the fact that I kept physically active, I think that really did help speed the recovery process. And 6 weeks out, I was back training again. So albeit, being careful with what I did, and checking in with how I felt, etc. But yeah, no, I mean, it was a beautiful experience at the same time, as albeit being traumatic. But and baby was healthy, baby girl was very healthy. We were all happy. But again, not having family members to share in with that experience was sad. It was sad, to be honest. It was upsetting. But connecting, with technology these days, you can connect over Skype and FaceTime. So that's what we have been doing up until this point. And I have to comment on the fact that the maternity leave period, I honestly thought that I would be able to get a lot more done during that maternity kind of leave. And it's it's quite eye-opening to the fact that no, you're going to be sleep deprived to the point where you can barely put any food in your mouth. You just want to sleep, and it's all about prioritizing. Okay, do I sleep? Do I eat? Do I clean the house, kind of thing? So it's sorry.
Maybe later.
Yeah, exactly. And then the whole breastfeeding journey as well. That was also something it was all very new to me. You hear a lot of, breastfed is best, but then you hear a lot of people that aren't able to breastfeed. And I was lucky while at the hospital. I was, the lactation consultants there were very, very good, and I got some really good advice. I was introduced to the pump, and that really got me off in a good kind of schedule and discipline. In terms of, so I was alternating between nursing and pumping, because I knew that the 3-month period, I have to go back to work. I have to establish some sort of stash of milk, so to say, so that someone else can feed her, and she also has to get used to the bottle. Not all babies accept the bottle, so it was all about kind of it was a very short period to kind of jam pack everything in and kind of prepare for going back to work. And I think also that was there was not much in terms of advice. It was mostly me navigating, myself and my husband navigating the whole process, figuring out trial and error. And then a lot of, we had a lot of input from people, but then again, they didn't, share the same experience we did or go through the same thing. So what worked for them, necessarily wouldn't work for us. So it was about kind of finding some sort of a routine. I know that's, almost near to impossible with a newborn. And just kind of finding out what worked for us best to enable the transition from the maternity leave, from the newborn stage to the 4 month, dealing with a 4 month year old, and then eventually returning back to work. So yeah, it's again returning back to work. So I just returned back last week, and that's been interesting as well. I've learned how to pump on the go, and thankfully I've been provided with a room to that I can pump in, and I've got a really good schedule when it comes to pumping now. So that's kind of become a routine thing where I got my time, I've got my schedule. I know I have to stop what I'm doing, kind of take a little bit of time out as best I can, and yeah, just kind of do what I can as best I can. So yeah, but again, with the COVID situation, I know it's improved a lot since we last spoke about it, and since last year, and so yeah, it's been the fact that I can work part-time. So I'm working 3 times a week at the office, and then the other 2 times a week I spend at home. So that's really been good for me. And in addition to that, it's also been good for my husband. So we can actually do and 50 share the responsibility 50-50. And that's what we're doing. We're literally alternating. He takes over one part of the day, I'll take over the next part of the day. He'll have time to go to the gym, he'll have time to go do his own work, and likewise I'll be able to do that as well. And that's literally how we're functioning at the moment. And so yeah, I'm hoping. I mean, it was a bit of a shock to the system going back to work, and leaving her for such a long period of time. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the maternity leave is really short, unlike in other countries. So unfortunately, you just have to kind of do what you can and make the provisions as best you can. And owing to the fact that, like I say, we didn't have any family support, we had to hire a baby nurse, and that's been good. And another interesting experience. Initially, we didn't really know what we needed, and over time, we kind of now know. Okay, we need. We don't need so much of the night shift, but more the day shift, help with the day shift. And also in terms of just advice again, tips, coming from a more experienced person, that's really been helpful and has helped us establish some sort of routine. But as you can imagine, the costs have been extortionate, and it's not something that we actually planned or envisaged would be the case. But this is the only way we can make it work. Eventually, we will put her into nursery. But yeah, that's still a little bit further down the line, I think.
Yeah. I don't know, like some places.
Yeah. So I hope I've summed it up, and
yeah,
I probably left out, certain bits that will come up. Yeah.
We'll probably talk
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting, like the maternity leave time and this compressors like you guys have experience with, you ladies have experience with this, you moms. It's a shame that it's not longer, I think some places do offer. I know one of my staff members, it was just a matter of like writing to HR, I'd like more bonding time. And so like, and I guess I don't know how that mingles with like benefits and vacation time, but like, yeah, like there should be more time, for mommy baby bonding, So, Anushka or Precious, like, I think my battery's dying. I might.
Yes. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. First of all, I wanted to just say welcome back and congratulations, Alia. Definitely, and thank you for sharing your experience, right? Because I think COVID has had a very unique impact. So me even remotely into my experiences, 10 and 8 years respectively would be 11 years ago respectively would be so different. But some analogies that I heard is just the idea of not knowing what you don't know. Even when you have mom in close proximity and friends and other folks who've had the experience, you still don't realize that you're not actually a part of that rites of passage, if you will, until you've actually entered motherhood. Because you wind up saying, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me this hurt so much? That nursing hurts so much. But because then you perhaps imagine that you would have been prepared, or the comfort or the tips and tricks that one can employ to kind of manage that discomfort. You did touch on lactation consultants, and I'm glad that you were able to access one. Many people do not know. Well, I'll just say that when I was searching for lactation consultants, and I'll share that both of my deliveries unfortunately had to, I didn't want to, I wanted to have actual births, but they wound up being abortion. And with that, your body isn't allowed to kind of step that slow progression into operation. And so the milk or colostrum doesn't come as readily sometimes. For my daughter, which was my first birth, that was the challenge, that she wanted to nurse and I wanted to nurse her, but my body wasn't doing what it needed to do. But we stuck with it. And thankfully, that was where having those familial supports became really, really handy. And sometimes it's the old school model. My brother said, don't think she's getting anything. She'll be fine. You just continue, So this is for those women who may not make that first 24 hours and, why won't you latch? And what about this? And what about that? Stick with it. If what you want is to nurse, then stick with pushing forward with that. And definitely you made a really good point. Introducing the bottle, because some of our babies will accept what they've been given, which is their mothers, their mother's sustenance from the mother. And that can be very challenging. I will share one story. I'll Deidre. Every time say son was very hungry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And from the very, very beginning, he still is, even at 8. And I just remember weeping. And I also did not allow my children to stay outside of my room to haunt them. So I forgot what they call it now, but essentially they kind of like,
Is she frozen
if
for
you
you?
can hear me.
Yeah,
Frozen.
she's. Oh no, there we go.
Maybe we can still hear you. Technology, everybody! Yay! It's technology. Well, I think she about maybe co-sleeping.
Yes, that's what I think she was. Yeah.
I listened. I listened to moms. I'm like, okay. Whatever I can.
It was pretty choppy. I couldn't hear but so much. I thought it was just on my end. But I mean, until Precious gets back on, like my daughter is 16, she'll be 17, so it's been a while. But when she was a baby, when I had her, she would not latch on to breastfeed. Oh, but before I go on, let me let Precious finish her thought.
I swear, my technology just will not let me be great. It's like, I'm gonna have to I don't know, do something.
Co-sleeping. That's where you left off.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, actually, it wasn't even. It wasn't co-sleeping because they were still in their separate, incubator. But pretty much, I think the term was sleeping in. Like they got to, and I did attachment parenting, so yes, I know all about co-sleeping. But the nurses would label the bed, like the bedroom would pretty much say that the parent is keeping the child in the room. And they would only take them out to like examine or even bathing and stuff I did in the room. But with my son, he ate a lot. And I found myself, number one, what I found tend to happen with parents like myself who wanted to keep the babies in the room, you kind of got neglected a little bit. A lot of it, honestly, I'll say. And I was at pretty good hospitals, but what wound up happening is it's kind of like you got your baby, you're in the room, we'll check on you, but you're on your own. And so that's when it's really important to have a good network, you know, that not only just dad, right, but because by my son we had a 2-year-old at home, but to have a network of friends and family that comes in to support you. But what I remember, there was a nurse, and she came in, and it was late at night, and I was just in tears because he wouldn't stop eating, and I couldn't get even to the bathroom without him crying. And you got your baby all night, you on your own, lady. That was literally what I learned. And the nurse came to me and she taught me how to literally, it wound up being co-sleeping, to sleep on my side, to prop him up, to lay on my side, and to just have milk readily available to him for him to kind of sniff it out and find it even while I rested. And it's little tips like that, little things like that, that really, really helped keep us, you know, mothers who want to try to stay as natural as possible, even though we're delivering in a hospital, even though we may be forced or sometimes unfortunately wind up having to accept the cesarean section. You can still create opportunities to have your experience be as close to natural or what you have in mind for yourself. Those networks, though, that you spoke of, those mother networks, they're really, really, really powerful. And I would encourage women to connect, even while pregnant, you know, connect that way, even if it's through a virtual meet. Well, now it would be virtual, but as many support groups as you can, because you won't know how much support you need until you need it. When the baby's screaming and it's between, you said cleaning, but I remember it was between taking a shower, like cleaning myself versus just not having the baby cry, right? It became that serious. So I'm glad we're having this discussion.
I am too.
Work.
I love these conversations. It's so funny because Precious, you know what I would do? I'd put my baby in her bassinet and roll her into the bathroom with me. Because she would cry and I'd be the only one home. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I'll be like really, really quick, but at least I can keep an eye on her. So I'm peeking every like 2 seconds. But that was what I had to do and then roll her back out. But when I had her, you know, I wasn't as knowledgeable as I am now. I was 20. And she would not latch on for me to breastfeed. I tried. One of the nurses came in the room and like my nipple was inside. So she plucked me really hard and I'm super sensitive. I was so angry, but it helped me, but still she latched on for maybe like 2 seconds and that was it. I said, baby, you know, I'm like, don't you want to get the milk? And she was like, like her little mouth was closed. I tried even when I got home. My mom was there helping me. I had a girlfriend that lived downstairs. She came. I have a picture. I kid you guys not, where I'm holding one side, my girlfriend's holding the other, and my mom has the baby's head, and then you see my breasts. And I was wow. It was literally a team effort. But I wish I had those mother groups like you guys mentioned. But I definitely had family and friends around to help support. But those groups and being a young mom at the time would have been more helpful because I didn't know about, like I heard about Lamaze, but didn't know all that it entailed, lactation, even that. And my advice that I give, like, you know, friends and family now that are having children, I'm like, learn how to breathe. because I didn't know how to breathe properly. So I was pushing incorrectly the entire time until my doctor said, do it like this. And once I did it, she came like that. And I said, oh, wow, I could have did it the correct way had I known, but I didn't. And to Precious's point about natural birth, like we're West Indian. So my mom was big on natural birth from the get-go. And she always was like, the doctors are too quick to cut you. So that was always in my mind. I'm like, no, I'm going to hold out as much as I can. And I didn't take any drugs. I didn't want an epidural. I was scared, actually, of an epidural. So I said, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try my best. And I ended up giving natural birth. And I just want to say everyone's experience is different because our bodies are different. Now, it was painful, but not as painful as I thought, because I was hearing things from everybody. And I was expecting the worst. But I was like, oh, wow. I remember to this day, I remember thinking to myself, this is the only time I get to scream as loud as I want and no one, thinks anything's wrong. So I just was like, okay, I'm going to do it. It was a beautiful experience. Beautiful. My room, I thought I had to share, but I didn't end up having to share a room. So I had a room by myself. I tried to keep my daughter in with me while I was there. The first night I did all the way into maybe like 3 a.m, but then I just couldn't because I was just so beat, so tired because of pushing so bad, like incorrectly. I had popped blood vessels in my face and everywhere. So I had like all these little freckles everywhere. And so I was just exhausted, super exhausted. And so the nurses took her into the nursery, and they would bring her in and out. I would buzz, they would bring her in. And we stayed in the hospital just like 3 days and went home. When we got home, the first night was like Alia's. I was like, oh my God. She had a tough night. But after the first night, she slept completely through, which I was so shocked about. I didn't expect that. And she slept in the bed with me. And my mom made a very big point to say, she should sleep with you. Don't put her in the bassinet. Mm-hmm. I was always afraid, I don't want to roll on her. I don't want any mistakes or whatnot, but I was very cautious. And she was a heavy sleeper thereafter. I would have to wake her up to feed her. I was like, no, you gotta eat. I would have to wake her up. But yeah, all those years ago, and just imagining what it would be like today in the time of COVID, it's a little scary because I'm like, what would I have? I am older now, but still, just not having your support system there, not knowing my partner wouldn't be able to be there, it would be challenging. So I'm grateful for the experiences, and now even going forward, because we do plan on having another baby. How I'm thinking is totally different, and all the preparations, like Alia, that you have shared, that Precious has shared, it's like it makes you think a little bit more, like what to do, how to better prepare, and some things I know you can't prepare for. You just have to go with it and kind of wing it and see how it's a learning experience. But it's good to just be aware. I feel.
So I no, that definitely I would agree with what both of you have to say. And everyone, Anushka, like you say, everyone's experience is different, and I think it's very important to kind of not take on too much of what people say, and understand that there's aspects you're not going to be in control of, and just go with the flow and not try and control things, which I kind of came to find out. I was preparing for every kind of situation, and it went the way it went, and that's how it was meant to be. I mean, we were told that I was having ultrasounds quite regularly, and I did question why that was the case. But then again, I had a fibroid, which I only found out about during the pregnancy, at the very beginning of the pregnancy. So, I was given the warning that, oh, this potentially could present itself as a complication. I never had symptoms with the fibroid, so it never really bothered me. So that's probably why I didn't really kind of know about it. But that is something that's common to a lot of women, looking into it at the time. And it was probably why they kind of managed it a little bit more closely. But even then, like I mentioned, the fact that, my husband was allowed in during the delivery into the hospital. He was not allowed in at the prenatal kind of appointments, the ultrasound appointments. So I would have to kind of record the scans and send them to him. So he never really established that kind of, that bond from the very first ultrasound, which I think is really, I mean, you guys probably can vouch for this, but it's something that's meaningful for the partner or the husband, for him to kind of identify with that, to see it. It's something that's really meaningful. So that was a real shame in that sense, that none of my appointments, he couldn't attend any of the appointments. What else was there that I wanted to comment on? There was something else. But yeah, just the fear of the unknown, not knowing, and how individual everyone's experience is and turns out to be. And yeah, and it was enlightening when I learned about how common fibroids are, especially amongst African American women, and how little women know about them, and how little we're told. And how they can present during pregnancy, and also in terms of the aftercare as well. So yeah, that was something. And then so I continued to have a lot of ultrasounds, and then eventually towards the end of the pregnancy, they did comment and say that she's a little bit above average size-wise. And that's another thing that you automatically, as to be mom, you're like, oh my god, is that a bad thing? Start googling like crazy, finding all these diagnosing your unborn child with all these funny weird things. And and it's something also to bear in mind, which they don't tell you, is that it's only an estimate. They can't get things exactly correct, and there are a lot of, you may be in for a surprise essentially. So again, it's all about letting go, not trying to control the situation as best you want to. So she was a healthy, but she was a 9-pounder. So yeah, and that's not something I wasn't anticipating at all.
That's so cool. My sister and I both were 9-pounders. My daughter was 7.5. But to what Alia said, you just have to give yourself some grace, and you have to understand too, like, doctors are trained a particular way, and sometimes it's just our common sense that has to kick in and say, okay, like, thank you, I appreciate what you're telling me, but let's see what it is when it actually happens and so forth. Because if we listen to everything that everybody says, we'll drive ourselves crazy as expecting moms. But I wanted to circle back to being a working mom, and I wish we could get like a year off for maternity leave. Like, that first year is so imperative to be with your child. I took a year off just because I was able to do so. I don't know if I would be able to do so again, but that's the goal that I'm trying to work on and that I'm working on, because I would like to be home with my son or my daughter when they get here. But I think there are challenges, but there's also ways that we can work through it. I know for myself, some babysitting was a big one, because I was going to school and working full time. Well, a student full time, working full time, and a full time mom. And my daughter's dad lived 2 to 3 hours away from us, so it was very difficult getting people to watch, and not just people. And it was always family. So my aunts would be able to help, and thankfully they were able to do that. But if things came up, if the baby got sick, or and if she got sick and it took like a span of time to recover, that means I'm out of work for that time. And of course that comes up, like, it's too many days, yada yada yada. And I think a lot of times people just looked at it from a business scope versus being more like human and saying these are real life things, and this is what happens. And so our employees have lives outside of the workspace, and being more understanding. I think during this time, especially during the time of the pandemic and COVID, people are realizing that we can be productive even if we're not in the office. So this just is an eye opener to folks that pre-COVID, that were saying, you have to be in the office, and giving people such a hard time, either be moms or dads, who's caregivers, giving them a hard time or making them feel guilty because they had these responsibilities to their family, now can see, no, not, we don't necessarily have to be present. We can work from home if we need to. We can, as moms, take care of our children and still take care of our responsibilities here at work. For all the dads and the caregivers, it's the same thing. So I think in the one of the pros of the pandemic is to show folks that we can adjust.
Yeah.
To show employers we can adjust, and and make it work where we're not sacrificing these important things that are to us, like important things for us and our family and our kids being the top priority, and that we can still contribute to and fulfill our responsibilities in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, something that I wanted to double back on, and Alia and Anushka, you both touched on it. It's the idea of us being in the United States and acknowledging that there is no mandatory requirement for paid leave. That's when you think about, where we're told that we live and how much we should celebrate that. The reality is, in the UK, and I'm just pulling the stats, as of 2020, you get 9 months at 90% pay.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to just look over, because I think on average, Switzerland is, 98 days at 80% pay. Spain is 4 months at 100% pay. So here in the United States, you'd better have a job that allows you to have accrued time, and you better be planning this pregnancy and bank that time, which means if you have, like Alia, you spoke about needing more sonograms than the average pregnant woman would. That means that if your physician doesn't have after like evening hours, how do you bank time when you have to deal with your prenatal care visits? How do you bank time when perhaps you're in that first trimester and trying to get through with maybe morning sickness or just adjusting to the change in hormones? It's really an important thing for us to discuss from a policy making perspective. I mean, let's talk about it. Dads only recently, I guess it's only the mothers who even qualified up until a few years ago. So now there's paternity leave, right? That wasn't even a thing. You were laughed at if your husband wanted to be home with you and to support you. What do you mean? Man, you come to work. So what? She had the baby. She's home. Let her stay there and figure it out. This is the reality. And it's important that we discuss it, because we're still way behind in so many important areas. And if we acknowledge that our children is our future, is the foundation of what the nation is built upon, then why would this be how we allow our children to enter into the world? With us stressed, trying to figure out how we're going to make ends meet, how quickly we'll have to go back to work. Yes, get that pump out immediately so you can start building your milk supply, because, you don't even know, they'll just be on whatever product there is in the store that's on the shelf. And Alia, you spoke about, being grateful for having a room to pump in. Even that is very recent as far as rights go in the workplace and a requirement for there to be a separate space. Imagine 7 years ago, because I perhaps it's been in place for about 10 years, perhaps. But imagine 15 years ago, working in a cubicle environment and needing, because your body is timed, for women who haven't had the experience, your body is timed to your child. So every 2 hours, you can be full of milk and ready to literally explode if you don't get that milk out. And if you don't, your body then naturally trains itself to produce less.
Yes, exactly.
And I can't say, clearly this is something I'm passionate about. I didn't even recognize that I was still this angry about how behind we are. But I can't say like how horrible it is for a mother who wants to nurse even for 1 year, even for 6 months. And you cannot, because your body is like, no, you're back at work. We don't even hear that baby crying anymore. We don't, we're not even connected. And so you have to record your baby crying, listen to it at work.
Yeah.
You have to trick your body into thinking your sweet baby thing is right there with you while you have this machine attached to you producing milk. So we've got a long way to go, but I'm glad we're having these discussions, because at least it'll prepare those who get the opportunity to watch and listen to kind of take notes and to talk more about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to mention something on the paternity leave aspect. I mean, there's so many different things we can discuss about this, and so many things that we need to bring about change and really need to be kind of fixed. Is that my husband got 6 weeks, and he wasn't allowed to take that all in one go, owing to the nature of his job. So, and again, because we were new parents, and I actually wanted to mention this previously, is that even though, you have the older generation, family members who have gone through the whole process, for some weird reason, and maybe Anushka and Precious, you can kind of, I don't know if you agree with this, you tend to, that short, intense period, newborn phase, I think a lot of people tend to kind of almost forget about, it's taken over with all the nice, the nicer memories, and I think not a lot of people remember how intense it was, and they don't give you, an accurate representation of how bad, especially if you're on your own, it can be. And we underestimated that. And he was like, oh yeah, I'll take 2 weeks off initially, after the birth. And then we realized, actually, when I was stuck alone and he had to go back to work, we both realized, actually, this is not at all doable. I was recovering. It's one thing to recover from the actual birth, and then, you don't even have time to do that, mentally, physically. You have to, there's no time off per se. It's just straight into it, taking care of the baby, feeding the baby on demand, not sleeping, crazy. So yeah, for sure. I think we've made leaps and bounds, I guess you could look at it in that way, but we still have so much more, in terms of advancements that need to be made. And just the whole the pumping and having to anticipate going back to work, that can be ridiculously stressful. Precious, you mentioned the number of countries that have a more realistic time period that they give paid leave for working mothers, and I think Australia as well, brilliant. I think they give around 6 months, even more than that, and then they hold on to your job. Your job is secured for a year, exactly. And that, just knowing that, I think provides a new mother with so much comfort. And if you're stressed, you're not going to produce as much milk. The quality of the milk is not going to be that good. These are all things that impact the health of the child, essentially the health of the mother and the health of the child. We've not even touched upon postpartum depression. So that's another whole, kind of hurdle that you have to deal with it, initially to identify that you have it, and the different kind of signs and signals that that comes with. But I've also even learned about, aside from postpartum depression, there's something called DMER. So it's I can't remember what the acronym stands for exactly, but I think it's a negative reflex that occurs when you nurse or you pump. So it's a reduction in the dopamine levels, and it happens in some women. And what essentially happens is you get a overwhelming feeling of anxiety. And some women report overwhelming feeling of anxiety. You're completely put off food, a sudden lack of appetite, just a feeling that you've overcome with sadness, essentially. Oh, no. And and I looked it up, and I was getting kind of weird, really weird symptoms, and I couldn't explain what I was feeling. And it would happen initially when you first nurse. It can happen in your first few minutes of when you're nursing or when you're pumping. And it has, it's something that occurs due to a drop in dopamine, a sudden drop in dopamine. And so that can be something that comes about suddenly. It can be something that women are not told about or don't know, can't identify what it is they're going through. And it can, a more extreme aspect of it is it can put people off nursing or pumping. So just knowing about it can really help. There are different ways you can go about combating it, and just being aware. I think that's really important. So there are a number of things that factor in, aside from the maternity leave being so short, the fact that we have hardly any time. It's 1 month bonding that's given for bonding with child, and 1 month is certainly just not enough. So yeah, there's a number of issues that as a new mum you have to contend with, alongside getting back into work, being productive at work. I think that we all, these are all topics that are worth discussing, and having this conversation. Yeah,
you being like the newest mommy in the group, you're like bringing up so many things that I'm like, yes, I wanted to talk about that too. So the first thing, I want to bring it back a little bit. I looked at my notes. Overweight, baby, your gestating child being overweight, by whose standard? Exactly. Yes, we have to remember that the American BMI chart is not necessarily made for every body type. And if we remember that our body type is informed by our things that we don't even know about, where we're from and what class of people we were and what work we did and why we needed longer arms or longer legs or shorter trunks or darker skin or lighter skin, that informs the size of the babies that you will gestate. So if you're eating healthy, if you're drinking, you're not drinking soda and crazy things, right? You're eating healthy, you're exercising, you're doing what you need to do to keep a healthy self so that your baby can gestate in a healthy manner, then why would you be told, you're rowing? My goodness, that is impressive. Okay, I was macking and relaxing for about 4 months, okay? Just watching the belly grow. But to then have you take on that extra stress and worry of even having to research and self-diagnose what your child may come out with is just so unnecessary and unfair. And so again, who says, it's really about talking to your family. My mother was a teen mother when she had me, and very, very tiny, 96 pounds. And I was 8 pounds, 10 ounces, and 22 inches. That's pretty humongous. And so they scared that poor baby all the way to, and I was a month overdue, according to them. And so it was like, we're going to pull her out with every bit of force that we can muster, which caused serious damage. So I was a forceps delivery. And that is it's not done anymore very often, but it's a very traumatic way of being yanked into the world. And my body actually bears the scars from that, right? So it's important that we have this discussion. I know I've said that like 10 times, but that's one thing. The other thing is the idea of our loved ones, like I said earlier, and you touched on it. Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
I think there's that trauma response type memory loss. Mm-hmm. Number one, you have to get through it. Could I tell you how bad my C-section pain was? No, because I knew as soon as I got to that room, that baby came first. Yeah. So I stood up. I would wheel, like Anushka said. I even forgot that. Yes, I was wheeling my infant into the hospital bathroom with me when I realized, they're not going to come. You come with me, little guy, and you prop the door open as I do what I can't do in the restroom. but you forget that because you have to move forward. So it's almost like you have to kind of chronicle it in order to, keep a memoir, in order to say, oh yes, young mother, remember this too will happen. So the main thing that I will say to all of the young mothers, and to remind any of the mothers who are going around a second time, and by young mother I mean your first child, is nursing hurts like hell. Hell.
Right.
But it is the most gratifying thing you can do. There are things you can do to prepare yourself. There are fun things you can do with your mate to prepare your body for it. And do your research, because I know, and I'm going to close it with my commentary here, but Anushka, I know you referenced the invert. You said your nipple was inside, but I'm going to give the technical term, because I saw Deidre's face like, what? Inverted nipples. So there are women I made a note to define it. So so some women have inverted nipples. So while it may look like it's on the outside, when you go to nurse, it's actually in, like an innie belly button, if you will.
Yes.
There are things that you need to do, and there are special nursing cups that you can purchase, and there are certain techniques that you can employ prior to starting to nurse, that you can kind of do to prepare your body. So it's not just preparing for birth, it's a delivery. It's preparing your body fully. There's so much. I had like 50 books just to make sure I was ready.
I think this conversation, we need parts.
Yes.
Yeah,
So much. I mean, like, to what Alia was saying, and then Precious, as well, as far as like our elders telling us things, but they're so traumatized, and you're putting your child first and what you need to do. My mom, she had both of us in Guyana, and this was in the 80s. And so there was no medicine the way we have medicine here. Everything was natural. So she held nothing back. I knew the stories before I even thought to have children anyway. She would tell us stories. And and it's crazy because I'm 3 years older than my sister. And I remember my mom being in the hospital and me going to visit her. And outside the hospital was like a junkyard full of cars. And she was in such pain that she was like, I'm going to jump through the window. Like, I can't take it. I remember that at that age. But she said, she would tell me, it was so excruciating. But then again, this is a young mother at that too. She was also a young mom. And in a country that, medicine and technology wasn't so great and high and whatnot. So they had to make do with what they had. So I kind of knew all of those things. And so going into it, I was like, all right, well, I'm in a better state right now. I'm in a better state of being. And I have more in that privilege, like the privilege piece, right?
Yeah.
I have access to medicine if I needed, technology, doctors, and so forth. She didn't hold anything back. Others in the family kind of did, though, because you don't want to scare someone, especially a new mom. You don't want to overtell. You do want them to be prepared, but then it always goes back to everyone's experience is different. And that's how I am. When people ask me, like when new moms or soon-to-be moms are asking, well, what did you go through? What's your advice? I always say that to myself. It's everybody's different, and I say that to them. Everyone's different. So here's my experience. This is what happened to me, and my one advice, like I said earlier, learn how to push correctly. Go to that Lamaze class, because people in our community, the communities of color, West Indian communities, Black and Brown communities, we don't really believe in Lamaze. It's like, why? At least coming up, that was the impression that I had, and so it was. No, we don't need Lamaze class. You just do it the old-fashioned way. Your mom didn't have it. Your grandma didn't have it. Yada, yada, yada. But come to find out, it's not just about, you attending and somebody a trainer training you how to breathe properly. But it's a lot of different moving pieces that will help you when you go into labor. So it is the breathing. It's how to breathe, how to push, how to prepare your body, how to position your body. All those things are helpful. And so it's a matter of just, taking all the resources that you can that are available to you. And if something is not available, find out and ask, why isn't it? And I want it. And how do I get it? You know what I mean? Because a lot of times things we're not aware and we don't know to ask. And then it comes back like, well, why doesn't this community of people know what's available to them? Especially if I'm a soon to be mom, if I'm a first time mom, regardless of what my age is, I need to know these things. I want to know these things. If I'm not aware, then help me become aware, you know? So I think this conversation needs to continue, because our one episode is not going to cover everything. And there's so many things that we need to dissect and get into, from all aspects, right? We can laugh and we can joke, but then we get serious too, because there are a lot of serious issues that we have to address, and we have to not only address and talk about it, but like you said, change policies, right? Us just having the conversation may bring awareness, but what's going to cause the change? Policies, and it being implemented and practiced on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I definitely can, just to add to that, being proactive, definitely, and Nushika, I would agree with that. But as I think it's difficult, I think more so with the COVID situation, I don't think that, the healthcare system per se, I didn't receive any guidance in that sense. There was no indication, no, kind of like advice in terms of, oh, these are the groups you can attend. I was thinking, maybe someone should put together some of the links, some of the websites, some of the resources that would, potentially benefit a new mom. Because in that instance, during that experience, that first time experience, you don't actually know what you need. Certain aspects you're not actually aware of. It's only because I did a ton of research, and I came across this and I came across that. But it was funny because my mother, when I would ask my mother, she was like, oh, I don't actually remember, because my mother went through a cesarean section. She was a single parent. She had to discharge herself very early out of hospital, regardless of the fact that she hadn't actually recovered 100%. And she had to get back and, start up the business. She was, running this business on her own, essentially. So she doesn't remember. All she does remember is the fact that, oh, yes, I dragged you with me everywhere. But as to the actual details, she was like, she'd stop and think and not actually remember. And that was actually that was insightful in itself, because like you said, this experience can be so traumatic that you just naturally forget all the details and all the the hard bits that that potentially would help a new mother, knowing about. So in that sense, yeah, being proactive, but also, I think we need a little bit more guidance. And of course that varies depending on, the healthcare that you have access to, how many times you're seeing your physician, because I know friends that I spoke to would only see their physician, when the scheduled scans were, and because, I mentioned that I would had more than the average. So I was lucky in that sense that I got to see my physician more often. But even just to kind of, and to conclude, because, we could talk for hours on this topic, but in terms of just the aftercare as well, I was doing high intensity rowing before pregnancy, continued throughout pregnancy. Okay, I dropped the intensity, but thereafter as well, that, the aftercare, when can I get back into exercise? You're given this generic 6 to 8 weeks, time frame. That may not work for everyone. As a kind of an established athlete, I could potentially, my body's geared up in a different way. It's accustomed to something different. So that advice may not be, advice that would work for me. So it's about having a more individualized, tailored approach, and not like Precious, you mentioned about the BMI. That's consistently an issue, because I remember they had this with childhood obesity, and the way they would define whether the child was obese or not was by the BMI. So what if he's an athletic child? As an athlete, I know we don't fit into that generic measurement. If you're gonna, the components of whether you have more muscle, more fat, these all play into that kind of deciding whether someone is actually clinically obese, or just, have a higher proportion of muscle, say, or they may be, their physique may dictate a higher BMI, but it doesn't necessarily indicate ill health. So all these are all, things, and things that need to be kind of addressed. And Anushka, as you say, we need to probably have a number of sessions where we talk about so many of the important issues that, we haven't talked about today. I mean, I have plenty to add, and, it's all coming back to me because I'm still
Right.
experiencing it in real time.
Right. All the
Like,
conversations.
yeah, that. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say really quickly though, this conversation is confirmation. I'm working on a project, and just hearing you all talk about certain things, it's just like, yes, I'm on the right track. This is what we need to do and need to create for women, for moms, and just like parents, first time parents in general, whether it be moms or dads, all of these things that are missing in day-to-day society in our communities is we need to have all the resources. So I just want to say that this conversation has served so many purposes other than just sharing our stories and experience and expertise. And yes, Alia, I could relate to your mom being a single parent, because that I was as well. And my baby came everywhere with me. My colleagues all knew her. She so much that she was our youth at one of my jobs. She had her own badge and access to the building. And everyone knew her. I trusted her to walk in the building because everybody knew her. She knew her way around. She literally had directors come in and do stretches every afternoon. That was like their afternoon break. So I get it, because when it's just you and your child or your children, and you have to make things work, guess what? As much as you go to their school meetings and things like that, they come to your work meetings. They come and meet your work family and so forth. And it's just you have to make it work. And so you weave it all in together and make it work. So I can relate to your mom.
I'm so glad that you all were like so open about this, and we definitely are, because I figured like this would be a good time to talk about maternity, right? Because everybody else did theirs in May, so we're gonna like be outside the box, and we're gonna do ours now. So we are gonna continue these conversations. So when we come back with True Health Live, we'll be interviewing a doula. So there will be space to talk about more of what happens during pregnancy and some of the things. And maybe we can stretch it. Like maybe we could do like a fact versus myth busting. Myth
Mhm.
busting pregnancy, pregnancy and postpartum experiences. So we'll definitely return. And just FYI, Precious, I was a four-step baby too. My mom told me they used the forceps. I didn't know that it was traumatic, obviously, because I wasn't necessarily cognizant in that way. But the way she describes it, it does sound traumatic. And what you just said, I'm like, maybe that wasn't like the best thing. But yeah, and like you, Anushka, your mom, she had no meds. So I was like, what thing must that have been? So I don't know if I don't think I was a 8 or 9 pounder though, but that's my contribution. But we will be having more of the conversation on women and moms and pregnancy as we go forward. So join us next time on True Health Live, where we'll be talking with doula Kashia Knight, and we'll have more of like what mom's experience and also what her experience is the support in the room, right, and working with moms and clients. So make sure to let your friends know, people who are interested in what doulas are actually doing, and also more mommy talk and conversations about pregnancy. So with that being said, there's that's all we got for today, guys. And so catch us again on July 25th. True Health Live will be back with our continuing conversations on maternal health. Peace, everyone.
Bye.
Yes.